Hello, everyone. This is your host, Taylor Valley, and welcome to episode 2 of the Hawkeye Citizens Transparency Project, the podcast where we shine a light on what is going on in your city hall. Today, I'm really excited. I know we've been on a hiatus for a little while, but we've been lining up a great slate of guests to have onto the show, make it even better for us. I want you to imagine a small town city government, one that you trust to manage your tax money, pave your roads, keep your community safe. Now imagine that same city government is becoming a place of secrecy, questionable ethics, hidden pay raises, a lot of behind the scenes decisions that are being made in City Hall. And unfortunately, y'all, this is not fiction. This is what's happening right here in Hanahan, South Carolina. So since 2022, Hanahan City Hall has seen a wave of resignations, sudden departures, firing that are all publicly known and well documented. First of all, we have Kitty Farias, the city's procurement officer. Joe Gill, one of our respected public works director, he was fired under some murky circumstances and is now suing the city. Several long-serving volunteer citizens who were on our board, such as the Planning Commission, zoning officials resigning abruptly and pointing to a culture of intimidation and secrecy. And Courtney Soler hired a highly experienced assistant city administrator earlier this year. Just 3 months later, that person was let go, again, under very questionable circumstances. And the common link between all of these departures, y'all, is one person. And I'm talking about Courtney Soler, who is Hanahan's city administrator since 2022. And despite that troubling track record, City Council has quietly awarded Soler a massive pay raise. And here's the kicker, y'all. The final details of this contract were approved behind closed doors. And we do not know the details of that contract at the time. So we are requesting this contract through Freedom of Information Act channels, and that takes a while. So what we're relying on now is just some city insiders who have told us privately what's hidden in those budget documents. The reason why this matters is that this is not just a story about a paycheck or personnel issue. It's actually about accountability. It's about how easily our city's rules and your tax dollars can be twisted and hidden from sight. The city council quietly approved that contract, like I said, in a closed-door executive session. No public explanation, no discussion, no transparency. So today I'm excited to be talking to someone who was in the rooms where all this stuff happened back in the day. And so everyone, I'm very excited. Joining me now is Kitty Farias, again, who served nearly a decade as Hanahan's procurement agent. Kitty recently stepped away from that role, and I'm very excited to have you here today. How are you doing, Kitty?
Doing good.
Good. Well, let's just start out just real broad, starting at the beginning. Kitty, you worked for the city for almost a decade. Is that right?
8.5 years.
8.5 years.
I think it was 8.7.
We round up a little bit. We'll call it a decade. So clearly you cared a lot about the work you were doing at City Hall. At what point did you notice things were changing a little bit from when you were hired?
Where do I start? It didn't just start under her. It started before she was the finance director when I came aboard. And she did not know where any of the contracts were. She didn't know anything about the contracts with procurement, which is that's very startling that she didn't have any idea. When I got in there and I had to handle so many more things than just procurement. I had a lot on my desk. And I can say I went to her when I first started working there, and she was the finance director. So I fell under her and asked her, where do you keep all your contracts for, like your copiers? And well, we don't really have those. And I said, well, how can you not have contracts? She said, we just don't do that.
And how did you feel about that at the time?
Well, I spoke out about it, and I just got
told to be quiet.
Pretty much ignored.
So how do you think the finance director in that role didn't know anything about the contracts?
She didn't even know what I did.
Really?
She didn't know what I did when she was the city administrator and I left.
Okay.
She had no idea what I did.
Is it a lack of understanding about procurement in general? Is that what you think?
She doesn't know anything about procurement. She doesn't have the first clue about procurement dates back way back, like pre-Civil War. I mean, where I work now, they do procurement, and the majority of our procurement directors have Juris Doctorates. I mean, it's very, very deep into the legal world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's important to know these things because you can get sued. There's just so many things that could happen to the city when procurement is not produced the way it should be.
No,
there's no strategy there in the city. They do not include their procurement officer in any of their budget.
Wow.
Which is just unheard of.
Well, let me take a step back. I think for the benefit of our audience, could you explain just as briefly as you can what in a perfect world procurement should look like for a municipal government like Hanahan, and what the topic of procurement even is? I think some of us who are self-described, municipal government nerds, if you will. We're all about processes and the way things are supposed to work. But I think for the layman out there, they may say, Kitty, what's the big deal if they just go out and pick somebody to do a service? Why is procurement important?
Because it's taxpayer money. We're spending taxpayer money. They're our stakeholders.
Right.
So when we provide services, which affects everybody who lives in the city of Hanahan, trash, anything we do in the city, any kind of commodities or projects or large construction, that all comes out of everybody's back pocket. So the government wants us to make sure that we are putting out bids that gives everyone a chance to do a service for the city, but they didn't do that.
Right.
There were very few times that we had meetings with a large project where we reviewed all the bids that were submitted by firms or design firms or construction. We just didn't do that.
So, question for you there: when you're evaluating a contract, what are you looking for? Or for a proposal for a contract,
Well,
what are you looking for?
It depends on what the bid is asking for.
Okay.
Typically when you do just a simple bid, that's usually for commodities. When you do a bid design or a bid build design or an RFP, an RFP is basically, we kind of want this, but we really don't know how we want it. They didn't know the difference between a sole source. They didn't know any of that.
Right.
And that's what we have right now. We have department heads that are actually acting as procurement, and they don't know the first thing about procurement. It's
right.
Huge.
Right.
I mean, I took so many courses when I first came there because I'd not done procurement before. Once I got to a certain point, I submitted in the budget for me to get my CPPB certificate and was turned down every year. So
Really?
they didn't want me to have a certificate for whatever reason. They didn't feel it was important.
Okay. So just a complete lack of care to the procurement process. And one of my questions, I think one of my criticisms of Soler and her leadership so far, based on what I've seen, and again, just for the audience, I do hold a Master of Public Administration in public finance. And so I sat through many semesters of graduate level procurement courses. And you're right. I think one of the things that folks often misconstrue is, somebody like Courtney Soler coming in with a bachelor's in accounting, for example, you may say, oh, well, she knows money, so it's all good, right? But, when you talk about procurement, you're talking more about fairness, about taxpayer equity, about making sure that you go with the cheapest and best service possible.
There is so much legal in the procurement world.
Right.
We have never had an attorney look over a contract. Not once.
Right.
Ever.
Now, do you think that that's just, oh, it's a small town, Kitty, why don't you chill out and just let us go ahead and hire the people we know?
I was told that. I've been told that before, that I was over the top.
Really?
And I said, no, I'm not over the top. I said, I have to sign an ethics agreement every year, and I don't want my name in a lawsuit. Give
me an example of that. What do you mean by, over the top? Can you give me an example of maybe where you were putting your foot down based on your education and your knowledge, and you were actually told to chill out?
I think just for instance, I remember going to her and telling her that something that the rec director at the time had put out was a bid split, and bid splitting is illegal. You have there's tons of acts out there.
So could you explain what a bid split is, just for the...
It's when you take a bid and you split it so you don't have to follow the procurement rules, and you can get it out to whoever you want without, it doesn't go over the top. It doesn't have to be reviewed by council because you split the bid. Bid splitting and bid rigging is illegal, but happens all the time in the city of Hanahan.
Interesting. And you said that was in the recreation side of things?
The recreation department had been doing it for years before I got there. And I remember telling him, he was a nice guy. I don't think he knew what he was doing. He didn't know he was doing anything wrong. I said, you can't do that. Do what? And I said, you're splitting the bid. And I went to her and told her, she goes, he's not splitting the bid. That's ridiculous. That's the kind of thing that I would go through all the time. And I just go back to my office and go, okay, well, whatever.
Right.
This went on year after year after year after year. Various types of bids would go out, and I would say, well, you can't do this. We need to do this. And they would say, well, that's just the way it is.
Interesting. And where do you think that lack of care comes from? I mean, in terms of
because they don't have the knowledge of the importance of it.
Okay.
But it's basically the same thing no matter where you go. It should always have those policies and rules that you follow.
Yeah.
Because it is government, and we're mandated to do that job the way it's written by the ABA. The actual body of knowledge and the procurement laws are written by the ABA. So,
and if you don't follow those,
you open yourself up to all kinds of things, budget losses, especially budget losses that can cost. I've seen so much money go out the window there. I saw them buy a bunch of telephones. They were Google phones. They spent, the bid was, I think it was $11,000. They get the phones in, and they realize that they don't have the right SIP line or something in IT to get them set up. Years later, those phones are still sitting in a closet, and now their value has tanked. And every year I would say, can we sell these phones? We're going to lose money on these phones. Can we sell these phones? Can we sell these phones? Finally, the IT guy left and went to Berkeley County with Johnny Crib, and the new guy came in, and he finally came into my office one day and says, you can sell those phones. You know how much money I got for them? 60 phones?
Probably not.
$1,200.
Oh, okay. So just a loss of, almost $10,000. Right.
Loss, and they just didn't even.
And see, this is the thing I always tell folks when you're driving down the road, and I understand, county and city responsibilities, but when you're driving down the road and you hit a pothole that hasn't been filled in 6 months, or, you're dealing with stormwater buildup that's been a problem for 15 years, and they say, why can't we get this fixed here in America, the richest country in the world, right? Why can't we get this fixed? Well, it's because a lot of folks are not following procurement rules and the way that things are supposed to work, where you evaluate things fairly and you pick the cheapest provider who can do the job. And that's just not what's happening. Yeah. People are now, one of my questions for you is, did you think that this is maybe a result of what we might colloquially call just some back scratching that goes on, in a small town where you say, oh, Mr. Smith, he's done this for me, so therefore we're going to go ahead and just make sure he gets this contract.
That's how Seaman and Whiteside got that contract.
And tell me more about that.
Well, Seaman and Whiteside designed the amphitheater. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they were designers for that. I wasn't there when the amphitheater was built. It was already up when I came to work for the city. And the city, not public works, the rec director came into my office one day when all this project was getting ready to be put out. And he said, well, we're just going to use Seaman and Whiteside. And I said, no, Randy, we have to use bid process for that. And he goes, well, they kind of made a little design when they designed the amphitheater, and, they were the ones over the amphitheater, so we're just going to let them do the boardwalk too. And I said, that's not how it works.
Right.
You cannot do that. That's not how it works. That's unfair. We did bid out the construction, but not the design.
Okay. But you can't pick and choose like that, right?
No, you can't. They should have been either bid out both, or do a design bid build and have one company do the design bid and build, right, or split it and have somebody design it and somebody build it. It doesn't matter. It depends on how much money you have, how you're spending it, where it's going to be built. There's so many factors involved in a project like that. And that may not be a large project for some cities, but for the city of Hanahan, a $350,000, $400,000 boardwalk that's huge. A lot of money for us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it reminds me that we had put in a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, for some contracts specifically around city planning, and it came back with the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester COG contract, the Council of Governments. And so I was taking a look at that contract, and what blew my mind, first of all, it's very light for a government contract. It was maybe 1 or 2 pages of actual contract before I got into the invoice section. And what blew my mind about this contract is that there was no basis of pay defined in that contract at all. So there was no hourly rate, there was no per project rate, and then you start to look at the invoices, and you'll see an invoice, $2,800, $4,600, and there's no unit, there's no, there was just literally...
Not right. There's an act that follows that. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's an actual act that has a name to it, where it's labor laws.
Right.
Yeah, you could look it up. I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for anybody who's interested in digging in more. But I just remember thinking of that contract, and when it came to the procurement side of things, I mean, that is just absolutely key, is you have to know what you're paying for and how much it costs, right? Absolutely.
You have to have a plan.
Yeah. So when you're talking about these concerns, I think one of the things that just I want to know about, just as a person who spends a good amount of time going into City Hall, engaging with these staff, and obviously there's a lot of good people in there, right? I definitely want to recognize that there are hardworking municipal officials, and I mentioned this in a previous episode we did, but it was hard for me, I think, when I first moved here and started hearing about this stuff. I'm a city government guy, right? And that I believe in the profession. I believe in practitioners, and that they are generally good in heart and trying to do the right thing. And it's a hard job, right, when you're interfacing directly with the public. But can you just describe a little bit anecdotes, experiences. I just want to know a little bit more about what the culture was like in there, and just what it was like going to work at Hanahan City Hall every day.
Like you said prior, there's good people that work there. There are nice people up in admin that work there. But my experience was that if you don't follow along, doesn't matter whether you're right about anything. You go along with them, or you're persona non grata.
I got
get rid of you.
Yeah. Right. And we've seen that, right? And I kind of started out the episode talking about many of the folks who have left or resigned in some type of haste or with some type of controversy. But I mean, so was it an intimidating environment? What would you say was?
I would say it was intimidating to some degree. Not intimidating, but you went along with it if you wanted to keep your job.
Interesting. What kind of culture do you think that creates?
It's toxic.
Yeah.
It was very toxic up there. And there were several individuals that were very toxic there that left prior to Courtney coming back to work at the city.
Right. Yeah. And so tell me a little bit more about Courtney and that transition. So you worked under 3 different city administrators or 2?
I worked under Johnny Cribb, Mike Cochran, and Courtney Soler.
Okay. And what were some of the differences you saw? Because a city administrator, I always try to describe this to folks. A city administrator is the closest thing to a CEO that a city's going to get, right?
Well, I wouldn't put her under that.
Why is
CEO.
That? Yeah.
She doesn't really have a business sense at all.
Okay.
She doesn't have a business degree. She didn't qualify for that position. She has an accounting degree, not finance. There's a difference between finance and accounting. It's not the same.
Right. Well, and I mentioned at the top, I think one of the things, and the reason that we're talking about this today is that the city has gone ahead and approved this new contract for Courtney, which the total burden of this contract, we are looking at northwards of $200,000 once you factor in all of the different things, including this incredibly generous severance package that was included in there as well. And so, that's pretty unheard of in a municipal government. And so the reason that we're talking about this today is the size and the secrecy behind that contract approval. So what do you think she's bringing to the table to justify an amount like that? Because I can't figure it out.
I have no clue. I'm completely gobsmacked at this because I'm not even really sure the CEO of my company makes that kind of money, and they're international.
Right.
And when I heard about it, I thought, oh my gosh, how did that happen? I mean, how can they afford that?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? I haven't seen anything improve. All I've seen is a mass exodus of really good people leave the city, and people leave the planning commission. It's almost like she's a driver of all of that. I'm not really quite sure, but I do believe that it stems from her position.
So you were there when she came into the role, correct?
I was there when she was the finance director, and then she left and went to the Gibbs Art Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And then she came back and went to work back in the finance. I think one of the girls that replaced her had left, and she came back to fill that role again. And then when Cochran was let go, she was the interim and sent an email around to everybody telling them that she wasn't going to take that role. She wasn't going to apply for it for various reasons, I think family issues or whatever. And so she interviewed every single person that applied for that job.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't hear for like weeks, who's the new person? Have we hired anybody? And they had a council meeting, and the next day she was the new city administrator.
Thinking back to that council meeting, how did that go? Did you feel like there was different factions pushing different people, or was it pretty much just like...
Well, I wasn't at the council meeting.
Okay.
I just heard the next day when I got to work that she was the new city administrator after she told everybody, and she interviewed all the people that applied for the job, which I found unethical.
So she interviewed her own competition for the job.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Prior to that, she told everybody she wasn't going to take that job. Then she interviewed all the applicants, and then she got the job.
And how do you think we arrive at a place like that? I mean, because, we talk a lot about what we're seeing today in terms of some perceived corruption, some perceived, irregularities, some perceived incompetence going on at the city. That doesn't feel like something that one person can do on their own. I mean, I feel like there had to be something else there. Well,
that should have never happened. I mean, she should have never been interviewing, and then they give her the position. I think I heard the mayor say that they didn't like the applicants that she interviewed, so they just offered her the job.
Okay.
That's what I heard.
Right.
I really don't know. I didn't ask the mayor about it. I was really shocked. I think there were quite a few other people that were shocked, but she had asked one of the girls to clean out the new person's office where Johnny, you have to edit that. Say Johnny, I got Johnny Cochran. I think Cochran was his office.
I mean, hey, if the glove fits.
If you must have quit, you must have quit. But anyway, in his office, she had asked one of the girls, an admin, and I won't say her name, to go in and clean that office. And she scoured that whole office and cleaned the blinds, and the whole time she knew she had that job.
That's wild. It was like predetermined.
I think it was always predetermined.
Right.
Because, but I don't know. I mean, I can't prove it.
I always say this, and you know, I think there's different takes on this, but you know, a CEO or a leader, in my opinion, one of their biggest tasks, and it's often unwritten, but it's to set the culture of the organization. It's to set the tone and tenor and how people feel every day when they walk in the doors of whatever place of business they're walking into. And what we've seen, and I mentioned this at the top, especially over the past couple of years, is just a wave of exoduses, whether that's resignations, firings. I had the opportunity to engage on this topic a little bit, but we just hired an assistant city administrator in March of this year. And looking at this person's resume, highly qualified, a former city council member in a city that's larger than Hanahan, clearly knew city government very well, and she was gone and fired within just a couple months. There's a lot of fear driven behind these things. And so I was just curious if you could speak to a little bit about what the culture was like once Courtney Soler came into office in 2022.
Well, she was pretty much in control of anything you did. And I will tell you that I pretty much would say, if it was left up to me to guess what happened in this situation, she knew the job better than Soler. Mm-hmm. And she went to her and said, hey, why are we doing this? Why don't we do this? Or how is this working here? That's not how it should be done. And she doesn't like that. She doesn't like you to tell her that something is being done that's incorrect. She will blow it off. She's done it to me many times when I told her that we had an employee there that was married to another employee there, and he was submitting bids with his private business to the city. And I said, you can't have that. That's a conflict, and it's wrong. We can't do that. And she goes, well, he submits a bid like everybody else. And I said, you're not understanding what I'm trying to tell you. He shouldn't be submitting bids at all. And she just blew me off. She goes, I don't have time for this right now.
It sounds more like a fiefdom than a city.
It is a fiefdom. That's a great way of putting it.
Interesting. And so it's really kind of what she said.
People is what she likes to call it.
Her people.
Her people.
And yes. Are there people who are her people and then people who are not her people?
I don't know. I've never really heard her describe it that way. I think she pretty much, when she says her people, she's speaking of everybody up in admin, her people.
Her people. I gotcha. That's really interesting. What that sounds like to me is a culture of confusion, of fear. And there's another statement that we'd heard through the grapevine a little while ago.
It's inconsistent.
We don't want to create policies because we don't want to have to follow them, right? Well, could you speak a little bit about the city's policies and kind of what the situation was, particularly in your field of procurement, but even more broadly, just in terms of, did the city have adequate policy? And if they did they follow those policies?
Their procurement policy dated back to 1973 and was about 2 paragraphs long. And it had never been updated. Wow.
And there's state procurement law and guidelines as well, correct?
I followed state procurement law.
Okay. Because
the city had an internal procurement, 3 bids, and if it's over 5,000, it goes to council members to vote. That was it. That was all that's all we would do.
Well, one of the patterns that we have seen with the city, whether it was addressing, the city attorney appointment position or things like that, is that, and this is just my take on it, but I see Courtney Soler making decisions that are outside of guidelines, outside of norms, outside of policy. And then whether it takes a year or 6 months or just a few months, then going to city council and saying, hey, we need to change this, because she figures out that it's either against the law, unethical, whatever the case is.
She's been doing.
And we just saw that with a procurement law, an ordinance that came up a few months ago. Can you speak a little bit about what she was trying to do there and why that was changed? Because basically,
she decentralized procurement.
Right. It opened up the floodgates.
A horrible way to run procurement is decentralized.
Right. So would you say that you were put into situations where either ethically or legally speaking, you were concerned about what they were telling you to do?
Many times, dating from the time I started working there until she came on board. She didn't even really know what I did. She had no clue.
As a procurement officer,
she didn't know. She doesn't understand procurement and the processes and protocols and the government. I mean, you've got the FAR Act. You've got all these things going on that she doesn't know anything about the federal. And I would try to explain things to her, and she would never wanted to hear about it. She just did not want to know about it. She didn't feel that it was important, I guess, in the scheme of things or in her job duties. I don't know, but she was over procurement. Ultimately, the buck stops at the top, and the buck stops with her.
Right.
But I have to sign an ethics agreement every year with the state. So if something goes wrong and my name is on it, then I'm going to get called in. I'm going to be part of a suit. I'm going to have to go to court. And I didn't want that. And so I started looking for a job. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I've had people come and ask me to sign a page of a contract without allowing me to read it.
Really?
Just sign right here. I'm like, well, what is this I'm signing?
That's
just sign right here. That was the prior department head finance director before she came back to work. She came in, it was a contract for fire engines. So they borrowed money with some sort of finance thing, and she wanted me to sign on because I had a signature there for the procurement officer.
But you couldn't see it. And
she said, I said, have you read this contract? I said, because I don't want to sign on something I haven't read. Trust me, I've read it. I know what it is. You're okay. I said, okay, you send me an email telling me that you've read this contract. She forced me to sign that contract.
That's not okay. How did you feel leaving work?
Well, I just felt really uncomfortable. Apparently nothing happened of it. But the same thing when you have to have an opinion from a lawyer. She came in the office and told me, she goes, I have to have an opinion. And I said, well, you can't write an opinion. A lawyer has to write an opinion.
Right. And going back to your previous point, that's how you can get sued through the procurement process, right?
That's correct.
And when you talk about distributing and not centralizing, it's one of those things that it's not just a duty, it's a role. It's a knowledge base, it's a profession.
Yeah.
And if you say, okay, well, now everybody and their mother is now a procurement agent, where do you see that going? I mean, in terms of the legal exposure?
I think that is horrible. When I saw that, I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe they're doing that. They can't do that. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, they're just going to hurt themselves in the long run. All they're doing is, I don't know what their procurement officer is going to be doing if they have all these department heads.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe large projects. I mean, how many large projects is the city going to have? There's not really a whole lot of property left.
And it's funny, but it's not. But I always feel like the folks who have the least amount of knowledge in a specific area are the ones that are like, it's all right. And then you have your folks on the outside, these contractors, these service providers who are like, what the hell is going on in there? Right.
I've been called when we were doing the 53 acres, we had a meeting, and this was after she came back on board as the administrator. And we had a meeting with the contractors pretty regularly at the property. And she had a conversation with him. She was pretty rude, and she left. And I had walked over to the other part of the park. I was looking at some work that they had done at the pavilion. I wanted to see how it turned out. And I was walking back, and I see the architect and the senior project manager and I won't say the name of the company. And he walked up to me, and he said, what in God's name is she doing? And he goes, I'm telling you what. He said, I'm not going to take it on the chin from her anymore. This is the type of stuff I had to deal with all the time. And I would say, I'm sorry, I just don't have that kind of authority.
Right.
She's not going to listen to anything I tell her.
Well, and let's talk about authority for a minute, because, I think one thing to make sure that we're clear on for the folks in the audience is that city administrators report, at least in most government organizations, report to the elected officials. In our case, it's the city council.
Right.
They are the oversight over that person. And so my question is, I mean, if all of this is going on, what is the performance review process like? What is going on in terms of somebody actually evaluating these things? Because quite frankly, I mean, Kitty, I'm sitting here. This is an embarrassment.
It is embarrassing.
It's an embarrassment. So where's the performance? Where's the accountability, whether it's from the council side or internally? I mean, are there regular performance reviews? Like what is going on there?
I know I went once, and it's the third for 3 years without a performance review. She had been there a year, and I still hadn't had a performance review.
Oh, wow.
And then when Mike Cochran called me one weekend about something at Public Works, it was like on a Sunday, and I said, hey, Mike, while I have you on the phone, we don't do performance reviews anymore? And he said, yeah, we do them every year. I said, well, I haven't had one in 3 years. So I guess he went to her and told her, and she couldn't tell me I was doing a bad job because I wasn't. So she told me I had a bad attitude.
And that was an opinion?
That was her that was her belief that I had a bad attitude because she was upset that I had told Cochran that I hadn't had a review for 3 years. And she had been there a year already.
Was there an HR policy or anything that mandated that employees get regular performance reviews?
We're supposed to get them yearly.
Okay,
yes.
and that just
I don't
wasn't
think
being
she
followed?
ever gets any. I don't think they review her at all. That's why I don't understand why the raise.
Yeah.
Where I work, you get quarterly reviews, and then you get a yearly review, and then they decide whether they're going to bump you up.
Well, and it's not something I haven't seen before. In fact, one of the things that I was expecting is if you're going to go to becoming one of the highest paid city administrators in the state, that there may be some type of presentation, some type of rah, this is why we're doing this. And in fact, there was none of that. It was just completely negotiated behind closed doors.
Pretty much losing good employees in lawsuits.
Right.
That's all I've seen since she's been there. And when I was leaving, we were getting sued by a contractor, Hanahan Electric. They were suing Gulfstream, and the city was going to be next. They're on there because they sent me an email and requested paperwork. I'm trying to think exactly what was it they asked for. Bid documents, paperwork, a whole bunch of information because they were going to sue Gulfstream because Gulfstream hadn't paid them. And when I gave the lawsuit to Courtney to look at, she goes, "Why would we be involved in this?" And I looked at her and I said, "We own the property."
She didn't know that?
No, I guess not. We own the property.
That is unbelievable. And so that's a question that I want to take back to before Courtney was in the city administrator role. She's in this finance role. What led to that? What qualifications did she have? Especially given that, I mean, it seems pretty clear that she doesn't understand purchasing, procurement, or any basic city functions in terms of public finance. So what was the impetus to get her in that role in the first place?
I have no idea how they got her in that role or why she's in that role. I have no idea why they would hire her for that. And I remember asking the HR at the time, who she also drove away, got rid of her. So I remember going into her office and asking her when this all first began, when Cochran left, I said, "Is Courtney going to apply for this position? Do you know?" And she said, "Well, she can if she wants, but she's not qualified for it."
No kidding, right?
Those were her words. I mean, if you look at the duties of the assistant to the administrator,
she's not qualified for that.
No. Well, the duties for the assistant administrator or assistant to the administrator are the same duties that they put out for the city administrator, the same exact duties.
Right.
So she basically hired 2 or 3 new people when she got that position. So I'm not really quite sure what she does.
Yeah, and I just want to take
not for $200,000 a year.
Well, and just to take a pause here, I mean, what we're hearing right now from Kitty, folks, I think a lot of it's pretty shocking. I think especially if you're a type of person that seems to or tends to trust your local government, to trust the people who are taking care of your tax dollars. This type of behavior that you're describing right now, Kitty, is corroborated by dozens of people off the record, right? So what you're saying here, the culture, the behavior, the qualifications, the secrecy, the backstabbing, and all of the things that have happened here, this is corroborated by multiple dozens, if not multiple dozens of people who have come to me and said, what's going on in there is not okay. And it's affecting people's lives, like somebody like Joe Gill, right? Which was a whole situation.
That to me was the most egregious thing I've ever seen done to a human being.
Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, it's a public story. It's out there. You can Google the story.
I didn't realize at first what was going on. I remember seeing him go back and forth from my office. And I found out later, I think he was on FMLA when they fired him. I'm pretty sure that's what his wife told me. She claimed that he had been stealing from Public Works. And she called me in her office one day and she said, "I want you to check on a watch." I think it was a Apple Watch or something that he had ordered from Amazon. And she said, "Can you go and look to see what happened with that Apple Watch?" I was like, "Sure," because I was also the Amazon administrator, by the way. Okay. Well, Public Works is on the same property as the fire department. And they typically are gone by 3:30 in the afternoon for the most part. Because I know that Mr. Gill used to come in very, very early in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, to start the day when they would trash runs and things like that. And I would often get emails from Amazon stating left package, no one there, or can't deliver, no one there. Constantly get those. So anything could have happened to a delivery that was left at the Public Works or was not left. It wasn't an Apple item, okay? But instead of doing a clean sweep of everything at Public Works and all the employees at Public Works, they just focused on him.
Right. Why?
I don't know. But I do know that he got called into the office by her asking him how could he do his job when he was getting cancer treatment. And it went long after that, he was gone. Instead of calling him in the office as someone in charge or someone who is leading people, and sit him down and say, look, I know you're going through a really tough time right now. How about we hire someone part-time to fill in on days that maybe when you've had chemo and you're too sick to come in?
Yeah, where's the humanity?
There was no humanity. Right. It was like, you're getting cancer treatment. How can you possibly do your job, basically?
Wow.
And wanted him to resign. And he said, I'm not resigning. So she found a way to get rid of him.
That's just crazy.
I mean, some of the things I saw, it's just, to me, it was the most inhumane. I was shocked by what I'd seen, what they did to him. It was humiliating.
Well, and for
he virtually was called a thief.
And for the folks in the audience, we will link in the show notes the articles regarding this situation, because there was a lot of controversy about it. We'll also link some of the legal documents that have come out since Joe Gill went ahead and filed that suit. Because again, I mean, like you're saying, fired on FMLA, fired because receiving cancer treatments. That in a municipal government, in a state government, that is not okay. That's not how things operate. I mean, there's definitely guidelines for someone, like you said, a good leader is going to say, how can I help you? How can I support you? Right. How can I make you successful in your job? We are so sorry you're going through what you're going through. My understanding of Mr. Gill is that he was a very highly respected public works director.
I never had any issues with anything he did. And he would, whoever got a new truck or a new car from that department, they would bring all the paperwork in and give it to me so I could file it and put it on insurance. So very hardworking man. And, wasn't anybody that we hung out with, or was a family friend or neighbor that lived next to me and we hung out all the time and related in any way. I just saw him being treated unfairly. I thought that was egregious.
One of the things that's been so much shocking to me in terms of what I've seen in the past year, beyond just the pay increase, beyond some of the ordinance changes to cover her own practices and her tracks, is that there was a lawsuit filed against the city. I believe it was back in February of this year. In fact, there was two of them that were filed around about the same time. And one of the things that shocked me is that on the second lawsuit that was filed, the city actually went into default on that lawsuit. And the reason for it is that the city did not respond to the suit. And for folks that don't know, I mean, when you're served a lawsuit, you usually have a pretty set amount of time, 30 days, something like that, to respond. And, just from a very basic angle, your response doesn't have to be much of anything. It can be, a one-page document that says received, looking at it, we'll get back to you, but we deny all of this stuff, right? And then you submit that to the court, and that keeps the case process moving. And so what happened in this case with that second lawsuit is that there was no response to it. And the judge actually entered the city into a default for that issue. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth on this. An affidavit was submitted by Ms. Soler in this case that basically said, I was out of the office. We had some paperwork get juggled around. It was served properly, but I didn't know about it, and we didn't really know who was responsible for getting that answer. Now, I find that hard to believe. In the first lawsuit, the other one I was talking about, there was actually a submission by the attorney that said that they were aware of two lawsuits, and so the stories don't add up there. And so again, when you put that level of I don't want to call it incompetence. It sounded more like negligence. We just didn't want to deal with it. Regardless of the city administrator's medical conditions, the assistant city administrator that we discussed earlier was there at the time. The city attorney's in and out of that building multiple times a week. Why do you think something as big as getting served a lawsuit could fall through the cracks in Courtney's administration?
I personally think it's just incompetence. I mean, I don't know how you can not know. Somebody had to be in charge when she was not there.
Right.
You don't blame anybody for being sick or having to have surgery or anything like that. But when you leave, there has to be someone in charge to take your place and step into your shoes. And that's what the assistant is supposed to do. Someone along the line didn't do their job, because that's a big deal.
Very big deal.
This isn't, a delivery of sodas that got left on the back porch. This is a lawsuit. And everything that happens at City Hall trickles down to the taxpayers. Everything. This is a government that runs the city for the citizens, that elect them to do their jobs, which I do not see council doing their jobs. The attitude that we don't do roads and water, it's not our problem, go call the county. It's their job to say, okay, we've got a ton of potholes here. Council member's going to call county and take care of that.
Because my question is, I mean, if I failed a very basic duty of responding to a lawsuit that potentially put the city and the taxpayers in possibly millions of dollars of liabilities, I would expect to get fired. Or I would at least expect a talking to with my bosses, which would be city council.
That's a fireable offense. And I've heard people that have had meetings with her where she has been completely rude, and they're supervisors. They're people that she works with. I mean, people that she responds to, people that she owes information to, and then to treat them like she runs the city. She basically runs the city. The council doesn't run the city.
Right. And that's my question, is I've never quite understood that dichotomy, because generally speaking, in a council mayor type setup with a city administrator or city manager, there's a lot of oversight. There's a lot of questions. Cities I used to live in, I mean, the city administrator would have to go up there and actually have some degree of accountability and answer questions. And you would actually have a very engaged council saying, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And we don't see that at all.
No.
She gets to go up there and give her little city administrator report about the parks, about the events coming up, and blah, blah, blah. And there's no degree of accountability. No one has asked her in a public setting, Courtney, why didn't you respond to that lawsuit that almost put this city into default?
They hide all of that. They don't want the citizens to hear any of that. They don't want the citizens to know who bought the property across the street. They don't. And there's no transparency at the city.
What do you mean property across the street? Because I put in a few Freedom of Information Act requests around a property sale on Yeamans Hall Road across from City Hall. Mm-hmm. I have an outstanding request for some property that was sold up on Williams Lane. Lots of indications, lots of Carolina One Realty paw prints all over that.
Carolina One has been involved in almost every single sale, the property, city property.
Why might that be a problem?
Well, the problem is we have city council members that work for Carolina One, and that's a conflict. It should not be happening. You should not be, as a city council member, if you're a real estate salesperson and you work for Carolina One, you should not be buying and selling property inside the city, because you have access to codes that you can change. You have too much access, inside information, and it just doesn't look good.
Right.
It's just doesn't look good at all.
Well, and I think a lot of folks don't know this, but conflict of interest, when we talk about the concept of conflict of interest, it doesn't just mean that I get money out of something. It could also be a benefit to my company, right? And I think that, what you're saying is
public perception.
So talk to me. You mentioned this deal across the street. What was your perspective on all that?
Well, that property was financed by the city for a citizen that, I guess I'm trying to think of what his name is. I don't know what the name of his company was. I forgot. I think it's Alex Gonzalez, I think was what his name was.
Yeah, they was.
They financed it. I've never really heard of that before. And I've worked in state and federal. I've never heard of financing for.
Were you familiar with this individual, or was?
No, I didn't know him. He came out of the blue. I don't know where he came from, and they financed the property. And you know how I found out about it? It wasn't because I was told up in administration. I was getting physical therapy because I had knee surgery,
mm-hmm.
and the therapist asked me, "Goes, since when does the city finance for private citizens?" I said, "We don't do that." He goes, "Yes, you do." And I said, "No, we do not." He goes, "Oh, yes, you do." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "That property across from the city." He knew about it, and I worked in admin and didn't know. And I'm a procurement officer. So I went into her office, and I said, "Do we finance?" She goes, "Yeah, I wasn't really crazy about that, but Cochran wanted it done, so." And it turns out that he defaulted on it.
Right.
And Carolina One was involved.
The whole way?
The whole way.
How did that make you feel as a person who actually cared about the ethics of
Well, it's unethical. It should not have been happening. The
Right.
mayor was in on the closing, and I was asked to be in on that closing, and she worked for Carolina One.
Due to a microphone issue, we had to take a quick break and apologize for the change in audio quality here.
And we are back with Kitty, excited to dig into these topics. So Kitty, where we left off, we were talking about this land sale across the street from City Hall, and your experience being in the room for that. And I'll just tell you, we had a FOIA Freedom of Information Act request. We put in a request for those documents, and one of the things I always find with the city is that when they don't really want us to know what's going on, they will send a stack of documents this big, and buried deep within there will be a little bit of nugget of truth. And what I saw in those documents is city councilors, sitting city council members with their Carolina One email addresses all over those documents. I think one of the most shocking things that I saw in there was one of the responses from the attorneys that were a part of that closing going, wait a minute, we're paying a commission to the seller? Isn't that the city? Isn't that Carolina One? And basically just, yeah, that's what we're doing and moving forward with it. So talk to me a little bit about that experience, because one of the things that I'm looking into with all of this is why is, the city council, who obviously, especially in the last council, had a lot of real estate agents in there. What are all these land deals that are going on? And what was your experience with maybe some of the conflicts of interest that you saw in those?
Well, like I said earlier, it's a conflict of interest when you have council members who work for Carolina One or are real estate agents, and they're involved in sales within the city limits. Anything outside that, hey, go for it. Make as much money as you want. Happy
Right.
for you. Inside the city, public perception. It's just not a good thing. It looks like you're trying to make money off of your position. And I'm not the only one that's noticed that. The problem is with a lot of people nowadays in small cities like this, they're busy with their lives. They don't really put a lot of emphasis on local, and they really should, because local is where you're at. And it's very, very important, sometimes even more important than a presidential election. And people don't realize that.
Yeah.
I did see some things before I left where they were selling a lot of T-shirts and koozies and things, like really cool things, which is a great idea. But when I went and asked her how much money they had made on it, because I had to file the taxes, she blew me off.
Wow.
So whether or not they filed the taxes on that, I would probably guess, if it were up to me, I would guess no.
Yeah.
But I can't say for sure.
I think you're absolutely right that we focus on the national issues because they get the most attention. But what's happening right here at home has a big impact on your day-to-day life. It impacts the traffic you sit in, the schools your kids go to, everything, the parks that you have access to. And what I see in the city of Hanahan, and this is just my take, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it as well. I see a big focus on personality stuff, right? Conflicts, personality stuff, making sure that people are scratching each other's backs, taking care of their own, while ignoring the basic stuff that the citizens need, right? Like ignoring those advocacy roles that a city council might have when working with a county like Berkeley, for example. Do you think that's what you experienced as well?
Yeah, I think they're flippant when it comes to the citizens. When people stand up at the podium, and it's very hard for some people to get up in public and speak.
It's not easy.
And to be flippant to some of the residents, it's really it causes me dismay to see that. I don't understand that kind of attitude, but I think a lot of it is because some of the council members have been on there way too long.
Yeah.
And it's too comfortable for them. It's a one night a month seat, and it looks good on a resume.
Right. Yeah.
And that just raises flags to me. That's a red flag. It just doesn't. It doesn't.
But
it doesn't pass the smell test.
We have been going back and forth on when and whether to do another one of these episodes of this podcast. The first episode got a lot of positive feedback, but coming back and doing this now, there was a sense of urgency behind it, because to your point, this stuff matters, but it's often not talked about a lot, right? And I think that our goal here on this podcast is to bring these issues to light, because there is no performance review being done by city council. They clearly don't care. They clearly think that her performance and her behavior and her actions are not within their purview, because they've never even asked these questions, right? So that's what we're doing here, is bringing folks like you on to have these conversations. And I want to close with just a couple questions here. Just thinking back on your time in the city, do you think that there's anything you regret, anything you would like to have done differently, to possibly force more ethical behavior, or do you feel like you were just hamstrung from the get-go?
Hamstrung from the get-go.
Why is that?
Their lack of knowledge, lack of care. I really don't know. I really can't pinpoint that. I just know that when you're a leader, city administrator, department head, council member, you don't lead from behind. Okay. You listen to, just like a president of the United States, for instance, he can't do it all. He can't make all the decisions. He doesn't know everything about the military. He doesn't know everything about agriculture. He has advisors, and he listens to them and makes a decision. You don't see that at City Hall. They make their own decisions. They don't listen. Yeah, it's all about me.
Right.
And for me, it made me feel like I was trying to do the best job I could, but yet I wasn't listened to. Anything that I did didn't really matter. Or maybe it was just doing my job so well, they just didn't really want to bother with me. I don't know. Either
That could be
way.
the case.
Yeah, it could have been the case, but I know when I left, there was a ton of things that weren't getting done. I know that for a fact. And she had no idea what I did. But She called me on the phone one day and said, "Didn't you put those bids out before you left?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." "Well, I don't see them. They're not on skis." And that's because skis isn't where bids go on the state. That's where state entities shop.
Right.
Okay. We don't shop because we're a municipality and we can't shop on skis.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, where is it? I don't see it.
Well, and I don't want to
For
speculate
Stewart
too much, but we've got an ordinance this year in which they have distributed procurement authority down to departments.
I don't know. I have looked at some of the bids off and on just to see what was going on, and I can tell that it's really not up to par. Like I said, when you go to work for the state, if you don't have a certificate, you have to test for when it's required.
Right. Like a lot of jobs
Yeah.
that require some type of certification.
Just sort of like, pro hack, you get up there, it give you the position, you work, but within a certain amount of time, you have to have that certificate or you get fired.
True. Yeah. How do you feel about the future of the city, given everything we've discussed today? I feel like we're kind of at a low point right now between the defaulting lawsuits, the mass exodus, the clearer patterns of interesting real estate deals with people's names all over them that probably shouldn't be in those deals. Do you feel like we're turning a page? Do you feel like there's new blood? I mean, what's your overall take in terms of where the city's headed?
I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up in Berkeley County. I mean, as far as the city is concerned, with the 911 is gone now.
Right.
I don't ever see police in our area patrolling at all. It just seems like they've had a mass exodus of employees and they can't get good people there anymore. I mean, when you hire your assistant and you fire her in a very short period of time or just get rid of her because you just don't like her or whatever, that just tells me a lot. I mean, they've been through, 3 city administrators since I've been there, police leaving in droves. I mean, it just seems to me that they cannot keep good people. And it's not really, people really don't always leave for money. Most of the time they leave because of the poor leadership. That's why I left.
Well, they say, what's the word? It's people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses, right?
That's right. That's exactly what I was trying to say. They quit bosses, management, leadership. The leadership there to me is very haphazard. The city administrator to me she's not competent enough to be leading the city, especially not at the salary that she's now been awarded. I don't personally care what anybody makes for a living if they work for it. Good for you. But in this position here, again, we're back to taxpayer dollars.
Right.
And what has she done to earn that massive of a raise?
I can't.
Massive.
Well, Kitty, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your opinions on this.
Sure.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I think that when you're on the outside walls of City Hall and you see what's going on, whether it's through the council meetings or just through the day-to-day stuff, or even our Freedom of Information Act requests that we put in on a consistent basis here at Hawkeye, there is nothing more insightful than having somebody who was there, sitting down and sharing your thoughts with us. So I cannot thank you enough for coming on.
There's a whole lot more that's gone on. I mean, that's not comprehensive. Any of the information that I've said today, it's not a comprehensive list. I will tell you that I've talked to neighbors that in my neighborhood that have been completely appalled at the things that they've seen in the city.
Yeah.
Just very disappointed in the leadership there. I even had one of the neighbors that they bought a house there, they've renovated it, and now they're thinking about selling and moving.
And I think that's what we're here for, is to share this information so that the citizens of this city can get together and actually make change. Because you and I both know it's got to come from the people, right? And if people start holding those folks accountable, we can actually see some change. And so we have been speaking with Kitty Farias, the former procurement agent who has stepped forward to talk with us today. And it's not because it was easy, but because it actually mattered. So Kitty, thank you again. Her story is not isolated. I mentioned earlier that dozens of folks have corroborated these stories. This is a symptom of something deeper within our city government, your city government. Keep in mind, you pay for this. The departures that she referenced, the Joe Gill story, this recent assistant city manager we lost, the chair of the planning commission, along with several other planning commissioners, the board of zoning appeals officials. These are not just staffing issues. These are not standard staffing issues. This is a warning sign of a city government that has lost its way. Every resignation or forced departure or firing, it weakens the essential functions of your local government. It costs taxpayers money. Keep in mind, folks, attrition, rehiring, retraining, that is not cheap stuff. But beyond the finances, the operations, the culture, some of these issues that we've talked about, this is a question about what kind of city we want to be. Do we accept the secrecy, the backroom deals, the intimidation, the culture of fear, or should we insist that our elected representatives, our city council members, stand for accountability and transparency? Why are these contracts being cut in back rooms? These are not abstract concerns. They affect your roads, your schools, your parks, your safety, and your tax dollars, right? They determine whether our city runs for the benefit of a few, like Courtney Soler, or for all residents, like all of us who are sitting on the outside wondering what the heck is going on down on Yeamans Hall Road. This is your city. You have a right, and frankly, the responsibility to demand answers and have the courage like Kitty did today to come out, share your story, and speak out against what's going on there. Attend these city council meetings, ask the questions, go up to the podium if you have the ability to do so. Stay informed, keep listening to our podcast. We're going to be back on a much more regular cycle now. And because of the story we've laid out today and what's happening right now in your own backyard, the outcome is entirely in our hands. I'm Taylor Valley. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Hawkeye Citizens Transparency Project. We will see you again next time with another special guest.